The Questions Log, Week 8. What is it that makes a hero? Is it good intentions? The practical application of one's ability towards collective betterment? The punishment or correction of injustice? Does a hero prevent death? Does a hero reverse death? Do they deserve glory and fame, or does the act of recognition itself tarnish their luster? All I know for certain is that if you find yourself aligned with Lex Luthor, you're probably on the wrong track. This is 52 Pickup.
Hello, welcome to 52 Pickup, a podcast about the comic book series 52, the greatest comic book you have never heard of. I am Gita Jackson, and I'm joined by my usual co-host,
Professional comic book expert Alex Jaffe.
But we have some other ghosts or hosts
Hey,
today.
that's
other
appropriate.
co-hosts.
A Freudian slip.
Yeah, exactly. We've got some of my favorite people in the world, Dylan Roth and Dalton Deschain, from the podcast, Are You Afraid of the Dark Universe? A podcast I've been on a couple of times and hope to be on again in the future. Thank you for coming to the podcast, guys.
Thank you so much for inviting us.
Thank you. We actually might need your voice acting talents very soon here, Gita.
Oh, great. I'm really excited. Do I get to be Dracula? Not to burn pod for your other pod.
We need you as Evelyn again first.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
You know, I've done a little bit of horror voice acting, not to toot my own horn.
Oh, is that
Oh,
right?
well.
I can do a little Vincent Price. I can do a little Bobby Boris Pickett.
Okay.
You know, not to pimp myself out.
Yeah, Jaffe would be a great addition to your roster.
Yeah, we'll have to make this a family affair.
Oh, hell yeah.
For the uninitiated, why don't you tell us a little bit more about our guests this week?
I was going to ask them to introduce themselves, actually.
I don't trust them.
Dalton, Dylan, please tell me a little bit. I know about both of you individually as part of this podcast duo, which I really love. Are You Afraid of the Dark Universe? It imagines making a cinematic universe out of the canceled cinematic universe of the Universal horror monsters. That started with the Mummy, and then no one liked the Mummy, so they just decided not to do it anymore. And I love what they've done. It's very creative, and it's like joyful in the way that the MCU does not feel joyful. But please, Dalton, why don't you go first? Tell me a little bit about yourself for the listeners of this podcast who haven't been on your podcast.
Yes. So I'm Dalton Deschain. I reside here in Brooklyn, New York. And I am probably most known for having too many creative projects that I will very quickly rattle off. I'm in a pulp horror punk band called Dalton Deschain and the Traveling Show that releases our albums as horror novels that you can read along with the music we make. I write a horror comic called Monocle that I make on Patreon. And I am the voice behind the B-69s, the world's only band that covers modern pop songs in the style of the B-52s.
Oh, no way!
Yes.
It's really good.
You're that Dalton Deschain.
I am that Dalton Deschain, yes.
You're the only Dalton Deschain, so far as we know.
I actually am familiar with your work.
Yes. This year's EP will be out soon, or maybe probably already is by the time you're hearing this, with some Olivia Rodrigo and Doja Cat and System of a Down covers. So check that out.
Oh, that rules.
Genuinely, my favorite cover of yours is Sitting. That was
Yes.
the best one.
I did Sitting by Brian Jordan Alvarez. Sitting! Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm also the co-host of Are You Afraid of the Dark Universe, which you summed up very nicely. The very quick pitch is that we take the 2017 Tom Cruise Mummy movie that was supposed to start their own MCU and didn't, and we continue it. And every episode, one of us pitches the next movie. We have done like 14 movies so far, with 30 of them planned and like on the calendar. And we are about to record our Dark Universe holiday special, a Christmas special starring the Universal monsters. And that, Gita, is what we're going to need you for. Gita plays both Dracula and Evelyn O'Connell from the 1999 Mummy, as portrayed by Rachel Weisz.
I love it.
So Gita has voice acted for us several times.
The rigorous audition system of getting an email from Dylan being like, can you do this? Okay, let's do it.
Exactly.
I have questions, but I'd like to meet our other guest first.
Yes.
Dylan, please tell us about yourself.
Hi, I'm Dylan Roth. I'm a freelance movie and TV critic and commentator, and also a member of the Brooklyn-based punk rock band No Jersey. And also the co-host of Are You Afraid of the Dark Universe, which I'm only throwing in there because otherwise it seems like my resume is like way, way, way shorter than Dalton's. I'm insecure about it.
No, Dylan does just as much.
It's just that you're more focused.
Yeah, honestly.
No, you're constantly working. It's disgusting.
Well, I'm very happy to be here because, first of all, my favorite thing, even more than doing our podcast, is being a guest on other people's podcasts because it's so much less work.
Oh, it's
So
the best.
We didn't even have to write a movie for this. It was
That's
great.
true. Yeah.
You say that now, but you don't know what I have planned this week.
That's
Yeah,
true.
God.
That's
I
true.
think the thing with with our podcast is that we began writing like 30-page treatments to kind of pitch the movie, and at this point we're writing full screenplays for episodes, which means we're each writing a full screenplay about every 60 days.
That's
Which is
amazing.
stupid. It's
It
just
is dumb,
it's
though,
stupid.
yes.
I also we perform the scripts, we talk about them. I score every episode that has a script with original
my
music,
God.
which is, again, nobody asked me to do that. I just
Nope.
can't stop. That's why Dalton and I make a great team. I always look for a new way to create more work for us, and then Dalton kind of just throws up their hands and says, "Okay, well now I have to do that." And
You're always yes-anding each other, basically, in terms of a bit you're about to do.
It's nice that you use improv terminology for enablement.
Yes.
no, it's a nightmare. We're gonna die.
Yeah, whatever.
What is codependency other than long form improv?
That's fucking true.
I have a couple questions. Regarding this Dark Universe project, have you gotten around to a cinematic adaptation of Monster Mash yet?
We have not, but we have done like crossovers with all the monsters. And they have danced together at a wedding.
So it's a spiritual.
I feel like that's gotta be like the Infinity Gauntlet movie.
yeah, that's the thing. We're saving that for the finale. We have to
Yeah.
save that for Endgame.
That's
Yeah.
Endgame.
Yeah.
But these efforts to build an entire cinematic universe out of a failed pilot, as it were,
Mhm.
brings me to mind of the 2011 film Green Lantern with Ryan Reynolds, which was
Oh yeah.
the first attempt by the DC Entertainment Studio to create a cinematic universe that pretty much died on impact.
yeah.
If we're talking about building superhero cinematic worlds, which is something that 52 very much does in a comic book sense, what would it have been like if DC had started with that instead of, say, Zack Snyder's Man of Steel?
Would it have been comprehensible at all?
I mean, it's hard to say because there were projects that were in the works at the time, but they were not necessarily being tied together. Because I think that was not long after Justice League Mortal fell apart.
Right.
Yeah.
That was something that was going to happen a couple of years earlier, and they had been developing a Flash movie since like probably the year 1800 before the Flash was invented. Because that's the time travel involved.
Yeah, they've been developing a Flash movie since Jay Garrick was the Flash.
It is. You could tell they were trying to do the same thing that the Mummy did, which is like, here's a story that is, technically it has a beginning and a middle and an end, but we're just going to throw a lot of stuff at you. That's just going to be, this will be in the next one. This will be in that spinoff. This will be there. Like they cast Amanda Waller, right? And they had Angela Bassett. Good casting for Waller, although later we got Viola Davis, who's perfect.
Which is,
Yeah.
They're Judi Denching her in at this point. We're like,
Exactly.
no, we can't recast her.
yeah.
She's going to be in the new universe. But honestly, it would just kind of probably feel just very generic and half-assed and exactly like a Jeff Johns comic from that time period. Because that's who was at the wheel, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what we ended up with in the DC cinematic universe is very much a Jeff Johns universe. Aquaman is based on his Jeff Johns comics, based on his Aquaman comics. Shazam is based on his Shazam comics.
And it's his Justice League lineup as well.
Yeah, his Justice League lineup is basically what Zack Snyder's Justice League was drawing from.
And I think he's got story credits on a couple of those movies too.
Yeah.
I know in the controversy with Joss Whedon, the actor who plays Cyborg, I forget his name, I'm terrible with names, he also cited Johns as being part of the problem there. So his finger is in the pot, like extremely.
Ray Fisher.
So I guess it really wouldn't be that much different than what we got, other than we would have a Green Lantern in it, and it would be Ryan Reynolds as Green Lantern. The more important thing that would change is that we would not have gotten Deadpool, which,
That's true.
that's a lot of money that Fox and later Disney would not have.
Yeah. And I think tonally, like, I was watching the trailer for Madam Web with David because,
Oh, fun.
Gita, we know why.
just shut
Gita,
up.
We know why. We know why you were watching it.
That's wet, bearded Adam Scott. It's just, I don't know. I started watching Parks and Rec recently again, and I felt this deep sense of shame for the Obama years.
Just want to say R.I.P. El Muerto, the movie they were going to make about the Spider-Man villain who appears in 2 issues of Spider-Man.
Oh my God.
It was going to be like Bad Bunny, right?
Bad Bunny's star turn.
Yeah.
As El Muerto. Oh my God. I wish they made that movie. But I was watching the trailer for Madam Web, and me and my husband David started talking about like, that's a 2005 ass movie right there. That's a movie that has not seen like, you know how like some actors have faces where you feel like they know what text messaging is and like they can't be in historical dramas because I know that they know what text messaging is. That's a movie that knows what the MC, like that just doesn't know what the MCU is.
Yeah, that's a movie that's in the same Marvel universe as Ben Affleck Daredevil and Jennifer Garner Elektra.
Yes.
Like that's
Absolutely.
That's somehow time traveled from that universe.
All these Sony universe of Spider-Man characters, whatever movies, feel like they are the version that they would have made in 2005 if they had
Exactly.
And in a way, I kind of respect it, right? Because now the idea is to be like very, very faithful to the most popular version of the source material. But that's using the old model where it's like, I don't know, people don't care about the comics. We're going to do what we want.
Pre-Favreau.
And what they want to do is not like better, but it is like theirs.
Yes. That's true. They really have ownership over these characters. 1, because nobody cares about them. And 2, because like it feels tonally distinct. It's bland in a different way. It's like getting, if you've only ever got like the Stop and Shop brand vanilla ice cream and then suddenly getting the like fancy, you know, vanilla with the fucking specks in it from Duncan Hines or whatever makes good ice cream. I don't know. I'm lactose intolerant now. Where it feels like they are doing like deluxe average. Like that's what they're going for.
That's it, exactly.
And yet at the same time, Sony is making the Spider-Verse movies, which are better than all of them. Like,
Yes.
At the same time, they're making the best superhero films ever made.
Yeah.
It's hard to argue with that.
These people are not talking to each other.
No, it's just like it feels like 2 wildly different companies. I completely forgot that the Spider-Verse universe is also Sony. Like, what the fuck?
I've always said that animation has been like a prime medium for this superhero stuff. Like we see it since the Fleischer cartoons in the 1940s. And there's this stubborn impulse to keep navigating towards these like big name live action stars that don't really ever do the material the justice that cartooning has always been there doing since the 40s.
Yeah.
I appreciate you taking my question seriously, but what I wanted from you was to give an Are You Afraid of the Dark Universe style DC movie pitch to me.
That's going to be what we're going to do when we wrap up the Dark Universe. We're going to go back in time and do the Ryan Reynolds DC universe.
Honestly, after Universal buys Warner Brothers, probably next year, then that's just a natural next step for our fucking show.
I can neither confirm nor deny that's happening.
Yeah. Phase 4 of the Dark Universe comes to you by merging into the old version of the DC Extended Universe that never existed.
Well, I had a fun idea that we could do if Nintendo and Universal had just had a blanket deal.
Yeah.
Then the fun thing to do would be to try and sketch out a Nintendo cinematic universe, but you have to start with the 1989 Super Mario Brothers movie.
Yes.
And you can only use actors or concepts that existed in whatever year your movie would come out. So we'd have to do like a Metroid movie, but it would have to be from 1992. It can't have anything that was from the Metroid Prime games in it. And it has to be like the actor or director that would make it in that time period.
Oh my God, that's such a good idea.
Well,
actually have to do that now.
Here's my DC Universal conspiracy theory. James Gunn's first project as like the producer of the DC movie universe is going to be not Superman, but Creature Commandos, a series which stars front and center David Harbour as Frankenstein. He's already front-loading the Universal monsters into DC.
Yeah.
Wow. And they stole our tagline, right?
That's right. They're talking about the Dark Legion.
The Gods and Monsters thing.
Oh, yeah, that's it.
Which is from Bride of Frankenstein. And, and James Gunn used that for his new DC. They're going to try to merge the Dark Universe and the DC Universe before we get to.
Wow.
Good thing our production cycle is much, much faster.
That's true.
So you don't have to make an entire movie, actually.
They actually have to shoot it on film, which considerably slows the process.
Yes, we just get to pretend it exists. It's a big time saver and a money saver, too.
Yeah, when you just pretend a movie, then that's what we should be talking to Zaslab about, right? You can just pretend a whole bunch of movies, and then people can see it in their minds.
All right. I hate spending this much time talking about superhero movies. I feel sick. The thing I love is comics. Let's talk about comics. What's your comic book background? I know, Dalton, you're writing a comic. I mean, are you into horror comics? Do you have any familiarity with DC comics specifically?
Yeah, so my experience with DC has been limited. When I was growing up, I came into comics through the merchandising and, TV that I think a lot of us did, the X-Men animated series, Batman animated series, action figures, stuff like that. But I always leaned Marvel. And by the time I actually got into comics, which was in high school, my way in was the Ultimate line at Marvel, as I think it was the case for a lot of people. For me, it was specifically Ultimate X-Men and the Ultimates, which 2 books that
don't read those again.
Yeah, maybe wouldn't hold up on a rewatch. But as a high schooler who didn't know the lore, they were such a great place to start. They were cinematic, right? That was kind of the point of them. And, Ultimates had those 12-issue seasons that felt like a TV show. And so those kind of got me into comics originally, but then I went to college and didn't have money. And so the thing that got me back into comics was, against all odds, Thor: The Dark World.
Which everyone's favorite Phase 1 Marvel movie.
I was expecting so many things to come out of your mouth, but not Thor: The Dark World.
Thor: The Dark World.
Bump, dump, dump, bump, bump.
Yeah.
I saw that in theaters and I didn't like it, but after I came out of it thinking, man, there's so much weird, goofy shit in the comics. I want to know more about that. The movie wasn't good, but it was insane enough that I was like, I think it's time for me to get back into this weird shit. And so that's when I kind of dove into comics headlong and got really back into Marvel. A lot of indie stuff. This was also the age of Saga and Sex Criminals at Image.
Sure.
So Image was having this big resurgence, and I was reading a lot of those books, a lot of indie books. And I did eventually start trying to dip my toes into DC, but it was a very alien world.
Mm-hmm.
No pun intended. But because I just didn't know all the characters, and I knew Batman and stuff. Really, I followed Tom King over there. I had Tom King fever, I think a lot of people did after Vision. And so I followed him to his Batman run. And then I read Bendis' Superman, which I actually really liked, his Superman in Action Comics. I know it's controversial, but maybe I'm just Bendis pilled from being at Marvel for so long, and started sort of learning the wider world of DC a little bit. I'm still no expert, but I also went back and read Greg Rucka's Batwoman and Gotham Central, which are 2 books that prepared me for 52, I think, a little bit more.
Absolutely, yes.
Than I would have been otherwise. I have a familiarity with Renee Montoya and The Question a little bit, although I think The Question I know might have been a lady. Was there a lady Question?
Yeah, that's Renee Montoya, dude.
That's Renee, baby.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's been a while since I've read those books, but they were familiar to me going into this. But so that's kind of the short version of my comics history. So this is great for me. We're catching up on 52 because I didn't know most of these people.
I'm excited to hear about what you thought about this issue. Jumping you right in the middle, well, it was a little unfair, but I know, Dylan, you have read 52 before.
Oh, yes. So my on-ramp was very similar, very, very basic for a 90s kid. Batman the Animated Series was my favorite thing. The whole DC animated universe, I was obsessed. I would go on fan sites. I would download all of the turnarounds and make my own little fan comics. And then that led me through the Superman Adventures title into the comic book store.
Oh, so good.
Really good stuff. And weird that it's this is early Mark Miller.
Scott McCloud wrote the first 13 issues.
Scott McCloud worked on it. It's crazy.
It's so wild. Oh my God.
Yeah. But yeah, that was my on-ramp. Once I started regularly going to the comic shop, then I would start getting into the actual DC universe around the end of No Man's Land and the beginning of Hush. Those were the points that I was kind of getting into this.
Good time periods for Batman comics. No Man's Land was a very, very interesting concept for a sort of change of pace where basically it's think of New Orleans after Katrina, what they did to Gotham. That's basically it.
I do think of No Man's Land as kind of a precursor to 52, as this hugely ambitious line-wide event that should not have worked, but did.
It ran for 52 weeks across much titles.
All the pieces came together.
Wow. Yeah, no, it it was the exact right change of status quo for those characters, and everyone seemed to be on board in terms of making sure their books fit in that line. And it had like a coherent beginning, middle, and end. So it gives you a lot of hope for these crossover events that will be wasted later in life.
Actually, what's occurring to me now is, you know what No Man's Land and 52 have in common? Where they succeed is that very early on, they get Batman out of the way. He's not in Gotham City, and everyone else has to figure out, well, what are we going to do now? That's the exact same scenario as 52.
I think a lot of the best Batman stories are ones where Batman is not the main character.
Yes.
Like Greg Rucka's run on Detective Comics, the first one, where the central character really became Sacha Bordeaux.
Yes.
And that allowed the mystery that they were doing to have Batman as a suspect. He's been so far from the reader that you really don't know what's going through his mind, and you like metatextually know, like, well, no, he didn't murder his girlfriend. That's not happening. But like, what is going on with him? You don't know right away. But yeah, those were really great. It was a very exciting time to be a DC Comics fan when I was like in high school, which is when, you know, Countdown to Infinite Crisis, and 52 happened. This is when my friends and I we'd each like take a title or a line that we were responsible for, and then we would go out to the comic shop, and the next day during lunch, we would trade all of our books around so that we could each read all the stories without breaking the bank. It was really, really wonderful. So 52 was like such an exciting experiment. Like all of my favorite creators, my writers were being involved. I was at the time a big Jeff Johns guy because he injected a lot of new life into Green Lantern, which was one of my favorite. I was a Kyle Rayner guy, but he sold me on Hal.
Yeah.
And Greg Rucka had done this Detective Comics run that I loved, and Grant Morrison wrote the perfect JLA run. And I was like, and I guess I'd probably read some Mark Waid Flash at that period of time.
Yeah.
So I was very excited, and it like the excitement for DC at that time, it was sustainable, like across like different titles in a way that like I don't think I experienced again as a reader until Dawn of X.
Yeah, no, I think that's right, Dave. I got the trade of Powers of 10 and House of X for my husband to read, and just going through those first couple of issues, it's like this is a level of competency in terms of writing and structuring a long-term ongoing story that feels very rare. I think a lot of comic books are good, right? But there's a lot fewer of them are good on the level where I want to force them into the hands of other people.
I totally understand.
Right. I mean, even with No Man's Land, reading through No Man's Land front to back, because the creative teams keep cycling from story arc to story arc, it's not consistently great. Like the perfect version of it, to my memory, at least,
let me guess.
Novelization.
Oh, you said it. I wanted to stop you and guess what you were going to say.
Was that what you were going to guess? Were you going to guess the novel?
I was going to guess Greg Rucka's novelization. Yes.
Yeah.
Which my wife is now reading, actually. She heard me talking about it. And she needed the book for the subway. She's like, I'm going to check this out. And she keeps reporting back on like, oh, Jim Gordon, you poor man.
If you can get your hands on the audio drama adaptation, that's just an incredible work of art.
Well, that's extremely my shit, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of is.
It's one of the best things DC's ever put out that nobody really talks about.
They do pretty okay audiobook adaptations. I got to read the Sandman one also. They got some great casting for the Sandman
one's incredible.
I've heard it's really good. I haven't listened to it because when I listen to things, I end up thinking about something else while I'm listening to it.
I'm rereading Sandman for like the 13th time right now, and like those voices are the character voices now. It's
fucking sick.
Inseparable.
Yeah, I've mentioned this before on this pod, but I went to like a reading of it was Neil Gaiman and George R. R. Martin just hanging out, basically. Like, it was supposed to be a reading, but they were just, like, talking to each other. Just, like, the thing that's so annoying about Neil Gaiman is that he is that good. Like, he knows he's that good, and it should make him less good, but it doesn't. He just remains consistently that good and has always been.
Right.
Except he can't write an ending, but that's fine for him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we want to talk about the issue?
I think so. That is why I asked him to come.
Yeah.
So we're doing issue 8 today, and I actually wanted to mention this cover in particular. All the covers are J.G. Jones. Do we have any talent to talk about for this issue?
We do.
All right.
Let's talk talent.
Let's talk some talent.
As I mentioned last issue, we're currently in a period where we have rotating artists on each issue while our main artist takes a break to recuperate. This week, the issue is drawn by Eddie Barros, a Brazilian artist. This is the first of 7 non-sequential issues of 52 that he'll be penciling. This was one of his first major industry assignments after a short 3-issue run on Birds of Prey. where he built up a rapport with Gail Simone and went on to work with her on the all-new Adam series with Ryan Choi. And he'd work with Greg Rucka again on his Nightwing and Flamebird run. We also have a new inker, Rob Stull. Rob inks most of Eddie Barrow's issues on this series. Stull would go on to found and curate Sequential Art, The Next Step, a traveling exhibit spotlighting African-American contributions to mainstream comic book art and pop culture.
Well, that's extremely cool.
Some cool people on this issue.
I really loved the artwork in the I personally thought it was a step up from the last what is it, 3 or 4 issues with the last art team, I think.
Yeah.
Because the first 3 or 4 have Joe Bennett, right?
Yeah, Joe Bennett's our main artist.
Yeah, which is really great. And then someone other than Joe Bennett, I think, penciled maybe at least a couple in the middle there. But anyway.
That's true.
Yeah, issue 7 is weaker. It has all the faces look like a little bit off.
Yeah, that's the thing is I feel like the faces looked a little off for a few issues, and then this issue is just laser focused right in, really. Yeah. I mean, I don't know these characters, right? But every one of them looks very iconic in this. Some really great large focus panels too. Yeah,
no, I really particularly like the way that Steel, I'm John Irons. Steel is drawn in this issue.
Yes.
Because even without a costume, you can tell that he is a superhero. There is something about his whole vibe that is giving superhero, and especially in contrast to his young teenage daughter or niece. It's niece. It doesn't make sense to me that they're uncle and niece and not father and daughter.
Well, it's like Scrooge and his nephews. He's basically their dad, but he's their uncle.
Yeah,
Scrooge McDuck, to be clear.
Not Scrooge from the Dickens, but the McDuck version.
Yeah, and we never get really clear on whether or not Ebenezer Scrooge from the novel has any relation to the 3 ducks from DuckTales.
No, we don't.
He might.
We should exhume Dickens and ask him.
The Michael Caine version might.
Yes.
Yes, that's true. That's the missing link.
Now that the Muppets are owned by Disney.
God, that's really depressing. They don't know what to do with the Muppets. It really frustrates me. Just let them host a variety show. That's what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
I will say, though, Muppets Mayhem, pretty good.
All right, I'll watch it.
Or give us more literary adaptations.
One of my favorite games to play with my friends is to name modern celebrities and figure out whether they'd be good guests or bad guests on a Muppet Show revival.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's good. Olivia Rodrigo would kill it.
Yeah.
There we go. There's the next 20 minutes of the show, I guess.
Yeah.
No, but let's get to the issue. We're talking about this Soviet propaganda-esque cover.
This style is called social realism. I don't know a lot about the style, but I do know I recognized it immediately and went to my communist husband and said, "Baby, what is this?" I feel like I've seen this exact poster before, but a lot of these posters, if you Google social realism, look extremely similar to this. The idea is foregrounding the worker, foregrounding the tools that they use, and then creating a really inspiring counterpoint to American propaganda, capitalist propaganda. And it absolutely works that way. But of course, there's also Lex Luthor's big honking face in the background.
And the everyman sort of idealized Roman figures behind John there.
Yes.
Just some the boys-ass superheroes. And that slogan of be your own hero, which feels like it comes out of an Ayn Rand book.
Yeah.
It does feel like it's a really good encapsulation of what Luthor's deal is here.
Yes.
It's kind of built on the whole sort of false meritocracy thing, being oh, everyone will get the chance to be a superhero. It's well, there's a big price tag attached to this thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it will not just be, do we establish how, if there's payment plans and stuff, I think to talk about at some point, right?
I think so.
The super team that he puts together, I think are mostly people who are they're test cases and they get special dispensation or whatever as advertising.
Yeah, I think he's putting together a publicity team first and foremost.
Yeah. Lex Luthor is great in this issue. I always love it when he shows up, though. He's my favorite guy.
Such a good villain.
Yeah, I like the final reveal of his fetish dungeon that he's built.
We'll get there.
I guess we'll talk about that a bit more later.
My notes were wild for that issue, this part of this issue. I remember reading that part as a teenager and just being well, I hope this doesn't awaken anything in me.
But first we open at Steelworks, night 1. It's Sunday night in the DC universe.
This is what I'm saying about Natasha and John Irons. I've said it before, I'll say it again. The writing on their conflict is so CW-esque.
Yeah.
It feels like it directly influences the kind of conflicts that happen in the currently existing CW superhero universe. But it's like 10% worse because they're not actually writers from the CW who know how to nail this thing. She comes off, so they're having a fight because she's been told she can't have a super suit, and she also like now she's staying up late to make her own, and because she's been forgetting from getting metagene therapy from Lex Luthor for very good reason. And she's just super fucking mad at him, even though she's done nothing but be like a rude teenager all the time. She comes off as so unreasonable. And the key to like a child-parent conflict like this, like in Gossip Girl, is like understanding that even though the child is unreasonable, they want this really bad and they don't have a mature brain. They just kind of skip over that. But more important in the scene is that freaking steel is turning into metal. And that sucks.
Before that happens, I want to point out his expression in like the second to last panel on his first page where like, despite what they're talking about, John is clearly like pretty proud of Natasha, that she's like actually putting in the work. Like she's giving him attitude, but this is what he wanted from her.
And honestly, that's how I was empathetic to Natasha, because I think this is the first time you see her actually building the suit. And I was like, oh shit, she's actually doing it. Like he took the suit away from her, and like, even though she does want the metagene thing, like she's not just waiting for that to happen. Like she is taking matters into her own hands. Also, I don't know Natasha. Was she a Teen Titan?
Not at this point.
Oh, not at this point. Okay, because I thought she mentioned something about the Teen Titans earlier, and I was like, why would she trust Lex Luthor? Like, does she have no idea who Lex Luthor is at this point? Like,
I mean, he's been president. I feel like they should all know.
Yes, yeah.
Part of Luthor's scheme here is that he's now used the opportunity of there having been another Lex Luthor from another universe in the Infinite Crisis story to pin all of the crimes he's ever done on the doppelganger.
Exactly.
Okay.
So now there's suspension. Now everyone has this kind of suspension of disbelief that maybe the Luthor they're dealing with is good, and that's something that maybe we want to address later. But I'm really curious how this whole situation reads for you, Dalton, having not read Infinite Crisis.
Yeah.
Which situation in particular? Like,
I mean, any of it. Like, can you follow what's going on?
Yeah, that's always been my question.
I'm definitely following it. I think it does a really good job of introducing everyone's deal and giving everyone a very clear sort of plot thread in a way that, like, I think most comics that star characters that I know don't really do. Like, sometimes I'll go into a book where I know who all the characters are, and I'm just like, what is anyone talking about? I'm like, are you referencing some mini that I didn't read? Like, but this does a good job of recapping things. Again, I'm missing some context, right? Like, I didn't know that thing about the Lex Luthors. And so I'm kind of like, everyone seems to be trusting him a little bit too much. I have no idea who Steel is at all, or Natasha, or really most of the characters. But even having not read Infinite Crisis, I think this series does kind of give you everything you need. And I was looking forward to reading this because I almost wish I had found this when I was first diving into DC, because it's a good introduction to a lot of characters that when they popped up in, like, you know, fucking Mr. Miracle or Strange Adventures or whatever I was reading, you know, or Bendis, whatever, I was just like, don't know who that was, but they seem fun, you know?
Yeah.
And this is a kind of encyclopedia. Yeah.
Yeah. No, this is the place where they had their fun, essentially. So what I think really helps with your ability to just jump on is that it is so clearly influenced by television writing, where every week, especially at the time this was coming out, so this is like a prestige television drop. Every week you have to write your television episode with the assumption that at least one person has not seen your show before.
Yes.
And will need characters to refer to other characters by. You can't just assume everybody there knows what is going on. So, I mean, it's remarkable that the quality is so high for a book like this.
The necessity of the hey sis.
Yeah, like this is 8 weeks into this running, and they're still writing with the anticipation that they haven't met their entire core audience, right? Then more people are going to want to join.
And that's something I actually miss about comics from this era and earlier. Like, I know that was a big edict at Marvel in like the late 80s, early 90s that I think it was Jim Shooter said, like, every comic is someone's first comic. And so like all the heroes had to like state their powers, you know, or like, you know, I will use my ice beam to do this, you know, because you couldn't assume that anyone knew I guess you could assume people knew what Iceman's powers were, but for some characters, like what their powers, what their deal was. And now I feel like the thing is like, well, we're just going to put these characters in and people can wiki it, or people can Google it. I don't want to be doing that. I want to read a comic and have it be in the text and on the page. Like, I don't want to be stopping every page to be like, all right, now who's this fucking person? And looking them up. But at the same time, I get how that gets in the way of the storytelling, right? And this is the sort of tension of comics across the board is like, how do you be welcoming to new readers and also satisfy the old readers, blah, blah, blah. Not something we're going to settle on this podcast. But I think 52 does a pretty good job at that, where I never feel like it's distracting from the story when they're telling me what's going on. But maybe that's just because I'm finding that those parts very useful.
I mean, I agree with you personally. I think that the tension between a convoluted and really dense history and the ability to just tell a fresh story, this is one of the few comics that actually gets the balance exactly 100% correct.
Yes.
Does it help that they have 4 of the biggest superstar writers and one of the most an essential artist that is storyboarding every single issue of this comic book for them?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. This could probably never happen again and never has. So
let's go to the page you wanted us to get to before we slowed you down, where John is watching the news and hearing about the Booster Gold nonsense from last week.
Oh my God.
And taking it very personally because Steel has that history of people stepping in for Superman and not being who they claim to be. So I think John very much has a leg to stand on here when he remembers Cyborg Superman and the Eradicator showing up as faux protectors of Metropolis to be like, why was anyone accepting Booster Gold as a hero in the first place? And then something happens.
Yeah, this is such a black dad scene also. It's 3 in the morning. It reminds me of my black father specifically, who watches Democracy Now! 24/7. So this is what
and talks to the TV.
Yeah, absolutely. That fucking Nancy Pelosi, that kind of shit. So it's hard for me particularly to read about John Irons and not imagine my crazy socialist father.
Oh, this is a comic about your dad.
Yeah, there you go. My dad, who was frequently mad at me, but for stupider reasons, I didn't clean the dishes right. I needed to redo them.
All this time, I thought you were Renee, but you might be Natasha.
I was Natasha, and now I'm currently Renee. I'm one alcohol problem later. I'm now Renee Montoya.
Oh boy, that's where it goes.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's
I do
the
like
arc.
the way that these panels are laid out here. We've talked a little bit about panel layout before about what's TV. This is TV. This is a 2x8, and they're completely square. Especially in the final 4 panels, no words, which I think more comics should remember that you don't need to have words in every single panel.
Yeah.
His hero works perfect. You know exactly what's going through his head. He doesn't have to say anything. He's just the close up on his face after he taps his little chest and it goes tink tink.
Yeah.
You know what's happening. He's freaked the fuck out.
Am I way off base here, or was it Grant Morrison who was the originator of that cinematic comics term?
I don't know if they were the originator, but I know that that's something they've talked about at length as part of their process, right?
I remember that widescreen comics was a Brian Hitch thing.
Widescreen comics. Oh, was it?
But it might also have been Howard Porter and Grant Morrison on JLA.
It's very much something Jack Kirby was doing in the 70s with his double-page splashes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but definitely the sort of rigid structure of the pages is something that has struck me about 52 the whole time. You don't get a lot of really wild page layouts, which maybe that helps with the quick turnaround, right? That you only have a week to do it. You got to keep things simple, but
it also means when there is a splash, it feels really, really special.
yes.
Yeah.
The splash from a few issues back where they were talking about what happened to the space heroes during the transportation accident, where the panels go all screwy and the words all over the page. That suddenly feels incredibly luxurious when you've been gotten into these. It's usually pretty tight layouts of 2x8, 3x3, those kinds of things. The stuff where it forces a 4x3 perspective on you.
Yeah.
And really makes you think about the squareness of a television screen. So then suddenly when it goes widescreen, it's the bottom drops out. It's suddenly you're in the middle of this beautiful image with so much detail. Your eyes can careen all the way around it instead of being stuck in a very rigid layout, which delivers information efficiently, but does not necessarily always convey how the characters are feeling or what they're doing.
Meanwhile, other side of the country, we get the most Mark Waid-ass scene in the entire book so far. Finally writing about one of his favorite guys, Green Arrow. We're in Star City. There's a sign for the Star City Hotel, which is graffitied to say Star City Hell. No, for the Star City Deli, which is graffiti to say Star City Hell. And we see a guy robbing the deli, just running out with a big bag of diapers, being chased by the store owner. And we get our title drop, Thief.
Yeah, he's saying, stop the thief. But the store owner is the one that gets shot with the arrow that makes him trip and fall?
What?
Mods?
On our next page, we see Green Arrow decked out in his Neil Adams 70s costume with a besuited Ralph Dibny.
I love this scene. I love this scene a lot. I really like the bit of dialogue here, which is Ralph Dibny looking extremely badass in his suit. He looks so much more manly in this issue than in the previous. Dibny says, you missed. And then Oliver replies, he said, stop thief. I am for the guy charging $30 for disposable diapers in a disaster zone. Bernard
this
brother.
This scene is burned into my head as like the Green Arrow moment that I think of when I think of the character, at least in comics.
Yeah.
Did this scene radicalize you, Dylan? Is this
I was not even close to radicalized yet when I read this.
Okay.
Yeah. Obama had to happen first, right?
And in JLU, where he goes into the whole speech about how the government has to do for the people what people can't do for themselves, and I'm an old lefty, blah, blah, blah. Those are my Green Arrow watchwords.
Yeah.
This scene too, for me, I get mad when people forget to portray Green Arrow as an old hippie, like an old leftist. He's like a peacenik, right? Like he's an old leftist, and he's really annoying because he's an old leftist, but he's frequently frustratingly right.
He's Denny O'Neil.
Yeah, in the golden age of in like the best time for his character, his job was to follow around a cop and tell him that he sucks.
Exactly.
That's what the O'Neil Adams Green Lantern Green Arrow was. It was just, I'm traveling the country with my cop friend and showing him why he's fucking wrong about everything.
Yeah.
And that series ends with the cop quitting the force. Like, maybe I shouldn't be a superhero anymore.
Wow.
Okay, I need to read this one.
And he's right.
Denny O'Neil really said ACAB.
Yeah.
He really did.
I like to drill into the title every week. The choice to call this issue Thief, I think, speaks to themes we'll see of the characters feeling like something has been stolen from them. We see Booster feels that way about someone coming into his limelight. We see Luthor stealing the respect and authority that John feels is owed to him from Natasha. And we see a literal kidnapping at the end of this issue. So thieves all around.
Yeah, but most importantly, Oliver Queen thinks that small business owners are stealing from the common man.
Yeah.
And Luthor steals John's freedom and decision-making by forcing these superpowers on him.
Yeah, no, this, some of the issue titles have not been as significant to the issue as this one is, but here it all feels like it's all thematically really tied together. I do think around issue 7 is where the ball really got rolling.
Yeah.
And this is like another example of how the storytelling, you feel like all of these writers are on the exact same page. This, although you can definitely tell who writes each individual's little scene, you feel like they all wrote these scenes with a clear understanding of what they're driving towards.
So we move on to maybe the weakest plot in this whole story so far, the Connor Kent resurrection cult. That's what Ralph is in town for. Ralph and Ollie do some shop talk about what it means to be a hero in this crazy mixed up world. But he's ultimately here in Star City to chase down these Kryptonian resurrectionists. And they find a weird lab. And that's where we leave them.
Yeah.
I do have a weird quibble about this scene.
Yeah.
In the last panel, before we head back to John, in the bottom right, it seems like Ralph is realizing for the first time that the resurrection thing might have something to do with his dead wife.
Yeah.
Which, the first time he talks about the symbol meaning resurrection and it's on his wife's gravestone, I was like, oh, they're heading to like something about his wife being resurrected. And that's why he cares about this. But then I realized this whole time he's just been like, someone defaced her gravestone. And now it seems like he's realizing, wait, resurrection? My wife is dead. Those two things could be connected.
A thing that I think you're probably missing, Dalton, is that the way that I read this was Ralph is saying this and then realizing he's talking to a guy who recently came back from the dead, which you'd have no way of knowing.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Ollie has
Yeah,
been
that's a
back
better
for
reading.
maybe like 2 publication years.
Yeah.
Okay.
A little bit more.
A little more than that?
Quiver was 2001. This is 2006.
Okay.
But yeah, I think that's it. Where like Ralph has been abjectly denying the fact that this resurrection cult could possibly be anything more than a scam, and then realizes he is in the room with a guy who was brought back to life by an angel.
Okay, that does give that panel a lot more meaning.
Yeah.
Because when I first saw it, I was just like, my guy, aren't you a detective? Are you just now putting that these might be related?
Yeah.
The way that the sentence, so in one panel he says, they believe that the deceased can come back from the dead. And it sounds like he's just remembered what it means to resurrect something.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, that's how I read it, but it makes more sense that he's like, maybe that's not so silly.
Yeah.
No, it's okay. It might be distracting because Oliver Queen is drawn like such a slut on this page. Like,
Yes, absolutely.
he's like
Should be.
flexing. He's like putting the one arm up to show off his like the side muscles. I don't know, the side abs that he has. That Denny O'Neil costume is like it sticks to every single inch of his skin,
It
and
does.
you see a lot of it.
I was just going to ask if the upside down Superman symbol meaning resurrection, had that been something that had been established previously, or is that new to this series?
That's new to 52.
Okay, cool.
Interesting.
That's a Jeff Johns original.
Okay, so Alex funded my font of trivia. When did the Right Side Up ask, when was it established that means hope?
I believe that's around Man of Steel, the 1986 series by John Byrne.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's when that
Super
happened.
freak John Byrne, yes.
Yeah, the post-crisis reinvention of Superman, yeah.
John Byrne, if you don't know, is a huge racist, among other things. So don't look up what he thinks about things. You'll be disappointed.
There's a lot going on about, like, the way he writes young female characters. That's a little
it's just weird.
unnerving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dylan, do you have something to say? Or are you just...
No, I'm just wincing.
He was incredibly instrumental to superhero comics in the 80s.
Yeah.
Yes,
He's still writing and drawing his own sequels to his X-Men run on his private message board.
No.
That's really funny.
That you can still visit right now.
Oh.
Where he has ignored everything that has happened since his X-Men run and is still continuing it to this day.
Man,
Ugh.
you either have to be really good or really bad at something to pull that kind of move. There's no in between.
Yeah, and John Byrne is both.
Yeah. So moving on to the next day.
Day 3, we're skipping a day. Nothing happened on Monday.
Monday was just regular.
Yeah.
Everybody just went to school and work and shit, and they were just having a fine time.
Yeah.
John has gone to Star Labs to be like, why is my skin doing this?
Yeah, he's revisiting Kala Avasti, who's an original character we met a few weeks ago, who John has this rapport with at Star Labs, who brought him in the first time to check out Lex's dead body.
This is the only time that the art has really confused me on who a character is. I have to say, because I don't know her and she's been introduced in this comic a few issues ago, she showed up here and I was like, who the fuck are you?
Right.
Yeah.
I did have to look it up.
Yeah.
I'm doing that every page, so I didn't really notice any difference.
For you, it was normal. That's how you just read comics.
This person could have a 50-year publication history, and I would have no idea.
I have been proven wrong by Alex so many times on this podcast so far. I'm like, that guy must be new for this. No, they were created in 1956.
That's what I just assume.
Yeah.
And sometimes they do it the other way around. They'll introduce a character who you assume has been around forever, but no, Jeff Johns just made that guy up right now.
I do like the little joke of them. He's turning into stainless steel.
Yeah.
And I love also that John, he's so intelligent. He figures out what's happening literally right away.
Yeah.
He's like, Lex Luthor, you smug bitch. I'm going to kill you.
He flashes back to the issue where Lex touches his shoulder. And he's like, oh, that's what that was.
God, yeah. Remember whenever a weird guy touches me, I grew up and because of comic books like this, had a like unusually high fear of weird guys infecting me with gross serums.
No, that's healthy.
Via rings.
That is a healthy fear.
Yeah, I don't want a weird man to touch me from that and many other reasons.
Yeah. Who says you can't learn anything from comics?
It speaks so much, though, to like the long relationship that John Henry Irons has had with Luthor, and like the way that I think that if Luthor believed he had peers, he would consider John to be one of them. And so it's just the idea of being like, oh, this is funny. He'll get this.
Right.
Yeah.
He was that specific about it being stainless steel as a way to kind of mock his goody two-shoesness.
Yeah.
Because he was like, oh, here's a chemistry joke from my friend John.
Yeah.
Like you can just imagine him sitting in his chair being like, oh, he's going to love/hate this.
On paper, Luthor and Steel stand for the same thing, which is a human standing up for the pinnacle of what they can do.
The power of the human mind, the power of the human spirit. One of it comes through capitalism, and the other one comes through engineering, which I think is probably a better social good.
Yeah, but whereas John's idea is the power of what one man can do, and Lex's the power of what I can do.
Yeah. Not any man.
Yeah.
Lex specifically needs to be the one in charge. I'm just thinking about Elon Musk now ruining Twitter. It's just like there's no... He couldn't even invent an evil persona for himself. He had to steal Lex Luthor.
And Lex Luthor has such a better sense of humor. Like, the stainless steel thing is so much more clever than anything. Like, Elon Musk is carrying the sink into Twitter headquarters, you know? Like, that's...
Right.
Elon Musk had to invent a bot to tell him that he's funny.
Yeah.
You know, Lex has zingers.
Yeah.
He's got zingers. He's going to bust your ass.
If Elon Musk was infecting John Henry Irons with the metahuman gene, he would like make him smell like weed all the time.
Yeah, exactly. It was like, now your face is a Pepe face.
Yeah.
God. So we break up this again, like, was it 3x3 layout for a bigger series of panels where the lab explodes. And Kala says, John, all the samples are gone. Oh no. Now no one's going to know what's happening to John's skin. And that's too bad.
But John, because he's invulnerable now, is able to protect her.
That's good for him, I suppose. He hates it. You can see on his face, the expressiveness of this issue really does help with John's arc in particular.
He hates that someone has intentionally done this to him.
Yeah, it's taken away something that's special to him, yeah.
His bodily autonomy, they've established that it clearly really, really matters to him, right? He wears a suit rather than like activate his metagene or get metagene therapy for a reason. He likes building things. He doesn't want to, his body is fallible, right?
Right.
Whereas the things he has built, he is very sure of. And here he has to rely on his fallible body and not even a body he got to choose.
Right. We go next to a mysterious new character we're seeing for the first time, a montage that takes us through days 3, 4, and 5.
He's doing some great, superhero shit, helping little old ladies.
Yeah.
Helped some firemen, helped a cop, and then helped a pretty lady and her daughter. There you go.
Daughter.
Yeah. A pretty lady in a Wonder Woman swimsuit that I'm astounded that DC has not produced.
I'm sure they have.
Yeah, they should keep it on lock.
It's a good design.
365 days a year because there's somebody that wants that swimsuit all the time.
But yeah, this hero is the opposite of the self-aggrandizing Booster Gold, this mysterious cloaked figure who will show up in a flash at the scene of a disaster, rescue everybody, and before anyone can talk to them, they disappear again.
Yeah.
I definitely misread the panel with the cop in it and thought that the cop was the gunman that was stopped.
I also thought that.
Yeah, I was like, oh, okay, this issue's really socialist. Okay, cool. And then I was like, oh no, that's someone else's gun.
Yeah, this is 2006, so we did not have the mass radicalizing event that would make us all socialists yet.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
What's that Marvel comic, New Universe, right? Where there's a comet and then everybody gets superpowers because of the comet. That's a little bit like people becoming socialists after 2016 for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's moving the needle enough that this comic is radicalizing us against small business owners.
That's true. I was thinking about this when I read it. At the time that I read that comic book, I probably would have agreed with Ralph Dibny.
Yeah.
But now I'm like, yeah, fuck that manager. That's way too expensive for diapers. That baby's gonna poop.
Right.
Let him have diapers.
Anyway, this hero who no one knows the name or identity of, is impressing everybody, and Booster Gold is fucking pissed.
I love this Booster face.
Yeah.
Great Booster face.
God, he's so mad. I think that Mad Booster is adorable.
Yeah.
Like, just do.
He's so cute when he's angry.
He's incredulous, but he has no credibility. So it's funny to see him get mad.
Yeah.
Because he has no leg to stand on.
Yeah, no, like, he just gets bad vibes from this guy, and, like, of course, no one's willing to listen to him because he was exposed at, like, a hugely public event last week for being a huge fraud.
Well, that's what he's mad about. He has no opportunity to redeem himself because there's this other hero everyone's moved on to. No one's interested in Booster's redemption arc.
God. I mean, get this shit on Tumblr today, and there'd be people, meow-meowifying Booster Gold in this moment.
I mean, there were at the time.
I was one of those, but I'm not going to talk about that. Booster Gold being objectively horrible, and I was like, you don't understand. He's my little
Booster's
baby.
never done anything wrong.
Yeah.
I may have to blow an air horn every time we mention Scans Daily from now on.
Oh my God. Listen, Scans Daily also didn't do anything wrong. That was just a valid way of participating in the discourse.
So Booster's like, I want to know who this guy is. And one particular news reporter in the crowd is like, you and me both, buddy.
It's freaking Clark Kent.
It's Clark Kent, esteemed reporter of the Daily Planet, a metropolitan newspaper.
What if I was like, who's that? Sorry, I'm new to DC. Who's you said Clark Kent?
It's Bruce Wayne in glasses, obviously.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I see it.
It is difficult to recognize Clark Kent because I also watched the Lois and Clark TV show so much, and in that version, Clark has a little curl.
Yeah.
And Superman has it slicked back. So every time I see it slicked back, also it just makes him look like a douchebag. Like,
yeah, he does look like he got a fresh cut.
Yeah.
He's got to hide his identity somehow.
Yeah, that's true.
Next, we have what I think is the most inexplicable scene in the entire issue.
This is the pinnacle and the pinnacle of the CW ass writing, like a bad imitation of something that would happen on Gossip Girl.
This is, we need to get this story from point A to point B. Just like absolute wild nonsense. Do you want to describe what's going on in the scene?
Oh my God. Natasha Irons, who deserved more and deserved better. She picks up a phone call to Steelworks, and this doctor violates HIPAA to tell him that her uncle is having his skin replaced with stainless steel and that he needs to call the lab, Star Labs. And then
why does she do that?
She makes a weird face. And again, this is my least favorite thing about like teenage drama writing. There's so often you'll like overhear part of a conversation and walk away during the part of the conversation that will resolve your problem. And this is that, but so much worse because there's no reason for her to suspect anything. And then she sees a flyer in the briefcase that is just sitting on the table that is an advertisement for the LexCorp Everyman Project where you get metagene therapy. And she immediately assumes, based on these two pieces of evidence, which again mean nothing, that her Uncle John has gotten the LexCorp Everyman Project metagene therapy.
Yeah, I was reading Greg Rucka's commentary on this issue, and when he gets to this scene, he's like, I don't know, Lex Luthor must have been behind this. Like, maybe he slipped that flyer into the briefcase.
It's the only thing that makes sense.
Yeah, that glass you see on the first page there, that's just full of dumb bitch juice.
The fact that she doesn't even tell the person on the phone that she's his niece, she doesn't introduce herself at all. She's just like, yeah, can I take a message? And the doctor's like, yeah, here's all of this, like,
here's his medical results.
Here's about like metagene therapy and superpowers and like all this stuff that should maybe not be public knowledge. I'm going to trust you to secretly get this to him. And
what? She doesn't even know she's his niece. That's such a good point. Oh my God.
Just this could be a secretary. She could have a wrong number for all she knows.
Right. She answered the phone Steelworks. That could be anyone.
Yeah, Jesus Christ.
Could have gotten the wrong Steelworks.
The flyer being in the suitcase also just means nothing. It means absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
He could have just picked one up. There's plenty of them everywhere. Like, it doesn't mean anything. And she's like, you hypocrite. CW. Bad CW. This is not Gossip Girl. This is fucking One Tree Hill.
The only explanation is that the scene has been deliberately staged to get Nat to come to that conclusion.
Exactly. That's what Rucka is suggesting, that Luthor set all this up. But that's not anything we ever get in text.
Yeah. I do want to say the little Superman overall she's got, though, that's adorable.
Yeah.
And I also want that.
I'll just say, you got 20 pages in a comic and they knew where they had to end. So sometimes you don't have time for that 4-page diversion to make things make sense.
Yeah.
I remember at a con seeing some comic writer, I can't remember who it was, but one of the big names talking about the one-line fix, which was like, he was writing a comic and he was like, oh shit, Superman's supposed to have like the magic staff, but he left it in, 3 issues ago. Now I have to write a scene where he goes back and gets, and his editor was like, no, just have someone say, Superman, I'm glad you grabbed the magic staff, on the way here. It's like, cool. All right, now we can move on and we don't have to spend more time justifying this.
Absolutely. If they had just labeled the container she was pouring from as dumb bitch juice, then I think it would have been all
yeah, there you go.
All perfect for you. Yeah.
It's a prop fix.
We move on to Natasha angry welding, which is something you should never do.
Just angry welding without an apron. And of course, some fucking metal sparks go straight in between her breasts in her low neck shirt.
Greg Rucka throws Eddie Barrows straight under the bus in his commentary on this issue.
I remember this. I'm sorry, from Scans Daily, Airhorn Sound. I'm sorry. But I remember there was a conversation about this in the fandom at the time, that Natasha would never do something like this. It was incredibly dangerous and could leave her with severe burns, and she knows that. So it just makes her look dumb.
Oh, Greg Rucka took that commentary very personally, because I'm going to quote him. He says, as a side note, the script called for Natasha to actually be wearing a welder's apron so as not to appear at least responsible enough not to forego appropriate safety gear while working with molten metal. You can figure out all on your own why an artist or editor might decide not to go in that particular direction.
Jesus Christ.
Instead, depicting her in a booby halter top, this teenager.
Yes, this page was the wildest for me, because also like a page later, she complains about how much she's getting burned. And it's like, well, you're wearing a low-cut crop top while you're welding.
As if to prove the point, the next page of the commentary of the annotated 52 Omnibus features the script where we see Natasha wearing an apron. Like, see, it's there.
That's incredible.
Like, that was how personally Rucka took this.
Not only that, but on the next page, when she's running away from her uncle, like, her ass is drawn so immaculately. And while I was reading this, I was like, okay, but they're sexualizing this girl to a maybe plot hole degree, but she's probably like 20 or something, right?
No.
And so imagine my surprise when a couple pages later they talk about the miner's release that she needs for the metagene therapy. And I was like,
God.
This is a miner whose cleavage just got burned.
Yeah, we ran into this a few issues ago where like we had scenes of Starfire fully nude, which seem less sexualized than Renee Montoya in full dress.
It's especially frustrating because I remember being a teenager, there just like weren't that many black women in comics at all, let alone black teenage girls. And so seeing her not only be absurdly sexualized, but like just in general, why she was wearing overalls in the previous scene, right? Where did the top of her overalls go?
Yeah.
It's so frustrating because it makes it so much harder to take her side. Like the idea in like one of those CWS conflicts is that you see where everyone's coming from. And the pain you feel as a viewer or a reader comes from the fact that they can't see through their current conflict because you as a viewer are like, oh, but if they just talked, it's so resolvable, blah, blah, blah. Here, it's just like, John is right. Like, she's acting stupid and John is right.
John shows up while she's having her welding rage, just clattering her armor to the floor. And she confronts him about all this circumstantial evidence she's put together. Basically accuses him of being a race traitor? Am I reading that right?
Yeah, that does. I mean, this is definitely a comic book written by white people, but it does. It feels like what they were going for was her accusing her of being like a Jay-Z type, like black capitalist.
Yeah.
You know, like a little bit of a gentrify your own hood type guy. And they've gotten that characterization sort of correct by accident, but they just didn't know enough black people to write this scene.
My read on this was it was kind of just like Nat knowing her uncle and knowing that that's a button that she could push that would upset him.
Yeah.
But again, this is not coming from a place of firsthand experience or cultural knowledge.
You're just a stressed out Muppet.
All I can say is that from comic book knowledge, John Henry's identity as a black man is very important to him.
Yeah. And that is absolutely something an angry child would say to the adult that's responsible for their safety, just to make them angry, because you don't actually know how difficult it is to have people invalidate your identity like that or say that you don't care about it. Especially, like, he's always portrayed as like an outspoken social justice-y guy. So to hear that from his own daughter niece, to hear that from his own niece.
Take a shot.
Yeah, there you go. Do it for me. I can't have any anymore. But I feel like emotionally the conflict is correct, but the stuff they're fighting about is so fucking stupid.
There is also, I feel like, an interesting idea to be played with in the idea that if a black person's skin has been altered by a white person and robbing him then of his identity, that would be a major conflict that is not for this creative team to handle. It would be a very interesting conflict that maybe this team is not the one to tackle. But
a couple pages later, and I will talk about it more once we get through the stuff that happens to the space heroes in between. But a couple pages later, Lex Luthor says about the crowd of people waiting for the metagene therapy.
I've been waiting for this.
You know what they are, Mercy? Slaves. And they're all mine.
Way to make the subtext text, Lexi.
Yeah, but it's like, it is real and it is true, but they kind of don't have the time or capacity to like reflect on the fact that the one person we have seen this metagene therapy actually work on is a black man, and it affected his skin. Like, it is... I throw Evan Narcissus in here and he would have figured it out. You know? But I just don't think that these, especially after meeting the Great 10, I don't want to see their take on this on black culture. I really don't.
Before we get to that scene, we need to go to the one place unaffected by capitalism. Space!
Oh, God. So the space heroes.
Yeah.
Adam Strange is here. Pre-Tom King. And that's fascinating, but he's not at all like the Adam Strange we see in the Tom King comic book, which seems to be...
he's very much like the Adam Strange we see everywhere else but the Tom King comic book. It's almost like when Tom King writes a character, he reinvents them completely from the ground up, and it shares very little, if any, resemblance to the character as they've ever been written before. But that's not a personal bugaboo or anything.
Listen, it seemed like Tom King had some stuff he had to work out about being a participant in the Iraq War, and he did.
That's what all of his comics are!
Yeah.
If you were a CIA asset, maybe you'd be singing a different tune.
Look.
Yeah, Omega Men was heavy.
All of Grant Morrison's comics are about the time they got high in the Mojave Desert and aliens told them about the multiverse. And all of Tom King's comics are about how guilty he feels about participating in the CIA.
And all of Jeff Johns' comics are about comics that Jeff Johns read when he was 12.
Right. Yeah. If you become a comic book creator at this level, you're going to be excising your one specific personal issue for the rest of your life.
And all of my comics are about what a bad time I had working retail.
Oh, wow.
All of my scripts are about climate change.
There you go.
Yeah.
All of my songs are about climate change.
I don't know. I think Mark Waid might be one of my favorite writers because all of his comics are about, isn't the DC universe neat?
Yep.
And I can relate to that.
Yeah. God. So the space heroes are here. You say, Alex, that the Resurrection Cult is the thinnest storyline.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie to you. I've read 52 multiple times and I always forget what happens to the space heroes.
Yeah, it's so separate from everything else going on. It's such a footnote.
Yeah, especially this scene here it's 2 pages. It can be summarized in 2 sentences. Adam Strange and Animal Man are looking for Starfire,
who went missing last issue.
She was caught in a trap.
Yeah.
And now they're in a trap. At the end.
They get Ewoked from Return of the Jedi. This Devilance the Pursuer wraps them up.
Yeah.
And that's all we see of them this week.
Starfire is also drawn in an extremely sexualized manner here.
Yeah.
It looks like you took, the martini dance from ex-wife of Marilyn Manson. What's her name?
Marilyn Monroe. They were married, right?
He just married the corpse of Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah.
Dita Von Teese has that's famous burlesque thing. She does the martini glass dance. It looks like the exact same pose from that, except he turned it on the side. It wouldn't be the first time that a comic book artist has sourced how to draw a woman from pornography or from burlesque or otherwise risque photography.
Hello, Greg Land.
Yeah.
I was going to say, Greg Land took so many ideas from this issue.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, this panel of her upside down in the net feels like it's from a magazine you buy behind the counter of some seedy drugstore.
Absolutely. It looks like it would be in the non-nude Playboy issues. Remember when they went non-nude? It looks like that. Anyway, that's all that happens to them. Moving on. Now we get to hang out with celebrity Lex Luthor.
Yeah, celebrity slaver Lex Luthor.
God. I mean, he's so despicable, right? He's perfect because Lex Luthor exists all around us all the time. We keep finding new Lex Luthors, and they all get bald for some reason. Jeff Bezos, bald. Elon Musk definitely has hair plugs.
Fun fact about Lex Luthor as he was reinvented in the 80s. Much like Biff Tannen in Back to the Future Part 2, John Byrne's reinvention of Luthor was directly based on Donald Trump.
What the fuck?
Which is giving Trump all too much credit.
In his persona as like this self-aggrandizing real estate business mogul.
Oh my God.
Which he was like very known as like a slippery huckster at the time.
Yeah.
Amongst specifically people in New York.
The only difference between them is that Lex Luthor really is a genius. And
exactly.
Donald Trump is just really good at Twitter.
Right.
Well, it's like happy 9/11 to all the haters and the losers out there.
We need a posting Lex Luthor. We need some sort of, the next time they reboot the universe, he should just be a poster, a prolific poster.
If you want to see posting Lex Luthor, Mark Russell has written some incredible modern Luthor comics that put him in that context.
Oh, I believe that. Love Mark Russell.
I'm 100% sure that Lex Luthor, if he existed in this universe, would have like a fleet of anonymous accounts, like the OWB CEO that was like talking shit about people on Twitter. Yeah. There's no way. He loves himself so much, he couldn't not participate in the discourse every day.
I mean, in Grant Morrison's Batman,
I was about to talk about
Incorporated books, Bruce Wayne has those puppet accounts. That's canon.
Of course.
In part of his daily routine, Batman takes 10 minutes out of his day to spread conspiracy theories online about how Bruce Wayne is Batman. The people will dismiss it as crazy.
That's perfect.
He does this himself, and he kind of laughs to himself.
Yeah, this is what he does for fun.
I straight up would do that if I was Batman. If you ever see like a QAnon-style conspiracy theory about me not being an urban vigilante, know that I did that.
Yes, if I ever see someone post, I don't think Gita is Gita. I mean, they say I'm Gita, but are they really?
Methinks they protest too much.
Yeah.
I'm Gita.
All right. Well,
I'm starting to doubt it.
I'm not Gita.
My I'm Gita t-shirt is...
Here, Lex Luthor is gloating to Mercy in front of this line of people who want to be the first to sign up for his Everyman program. He spots Natasha in the line where a big white security guard is literally accusing her of getting lippy with him.
Jesus Christ. They just didn't know they either didn't know or thought they were being really slick with the racial stuff in this issue.
Yeah.
It's more likely knowing that these are all well-meaning liberals that they thought they were being real slick, but a non-white writer would have handled this with a lot more grace. I like Natasha a lot, but I think about how she feels in this moment. Now that there are a lot more non-white teenage stars and characters in films, I don't think that she would have the reaction to this white guy telling her that she was getting uppity, Like, I just don't think that she would. Yeah. And I think it would be a different way to play out. I mean, I also think that she'd probably be more mistrustful of Lex, but the story has to happen in a particular way. Mm-hmm. And we understand the conflict that they're barreling this character towards. She has to make this mistake in order to learn why she can trust her uncle.
And Lex, whose favorite thing in the world is dramatic irony, sees that Natasha is here and is like, of course this is going to be my first test subject. Why wouldn't I cut her to the front of the line? Especially if it's going to piss my nemesis off now that Superman's disappeared. I got to get under somebody's skin, as it were.
I'm really happy they go out of their way to remind us that she's a minor before this next page.
Baby.
Fuck, it's just, she's like, I hate using this language to refer to a teenager, but she is literally spread-eagled with some kind of device gagging her. And The dialogue he's giving is the whole package, Dennis. She wants it all, and she wants it now. So let's give it to her.
It is deviant art, fetish art. Absolutely.
I'll be honest, every time I have read this comic, I have skipped past this page as quickly as possible. Like, nope, can't let that register.
Yeah, you don't want to let that sit in your subconscious.
No.
Troublingly unhorny 17-year-old Dylan saw nothing, didn't get any of that out of the first read. It was just like, oh, okay, she's going to get superpowers.
No, exactly. I glossed over it like a Westworld robot. I was like, that doesn't look like anything to me.
I got to this page and I was like, oh, I'm on DeviantArt. Okay, this is about 4 different fetishes, probably. Very weird. You know what it is? It's the mouth thing.
It's the mouth thing. Plug.
If the mouth plug wasn't there, she would still be like spread eagle and stuff, but it's like normal, like James Bond torture stuff. As soon as you're putting like a tube down someone's throat,
that elevates
it's just a little weirder.
That's a ball gag scenario. That's a ball gag type scenario.
You would never see this on a male character.
Yes.
All Lex Luthor had to do was touch John Henry's shoulder and it mutated him. Why does he have to do this to Natasha?
Like, for as much as Green Arrow looks like a slut in his skin tight costume earlier in the issue, like we don't see like a loving outline of his fucking dick print, you know? The suit that she's wearing, the skin tight jumpsuit, goes up her ass crack. Like there's a lot of her body on display.
It's painted on.
Yeah,
her boob is in profile because her back is arched back, of course, as far as it will go.
Of course.
Jesus Christ.
What does the mouth thing do, Lex, I need you to explain to me why that's an essential part of the process.
He needs to re-up on the dumb bitch juice. She's running dry.
Another dose of the dumb bitch juice.
A lethal dose of the dumb bitch juice, yeah. It's that meme with the girl putting the milk down the other girl, but it's just dumb bitch juice.
Yeah, it's Lex Luthor and Natasha metagene therapy. Yeah, exactly.
That's what this page is, yeah.
We now go on to our incomprehensible backup. This is part 7 of our 10-part History of the DCU series written by Dan Jurgens and mostly drawn by Dan Jurgens, where he's taking us on a crash course through everything that's ever happened in a DC comic book. And it's just as comprehensible as it sounds.
Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
I did read this. It's very funny as a comic book fan reading comic book stuff from something you're not familiar with and noticing for the first time how insane everything sounds.
Yeah.
It doesn't when, you know what's going on, but then you read things like, it only ended when Superman plunged the true mastermind, Brainiac 13, into the same Big Bang that stopped Parallax. And I'm like, cool, none of these words are in the Bible.
The first sentence of this backup is, so the entire timeline was reconstructed after the events of 0 Hour?
Of course.
I'm only saying that. Yeah.
So we spent the entire last chapter of the backup talking about 0 Hour, an event everybody loved and still remembers. And everything in this issue is a condensation of everything that happens in a DC comic between the years 1994 and 2004. 10 years of comics in 1, 2, 3, 4 pages. And they do it by reducing it to the big events, because that's what people check in on events for, to read about comic book universes like their newspapers. So these are the things you might have heard about if you checked in for the major DC events. We talk about Grant Morrison's reinvention of the JLA with the main guys for the first time in a very long time. We get a nod to Hal Jordan sacrificing himself in my personal favorite event comic, The Final Night. The rise of my boy Connor Hawke, my favorite Green Arrow. Superman gets married. Ray Palmer is de-aged and founds his own version of the Titans that nobody remembers. Though Argent was on it, and I do love Argent.
Yeah, she's the goth one. Yeah,
she's the goth mafia daughter.
Oh my god, what a good character concept. Anyway.
Yeah, she's great. Tony Minetti. We've got Electric Blue Superman, which was a thing that lasted 6 months.
And should still be in print today.
Yeah.
Wow.
It should still be Electric Blue. They should never have changed it back.
Make your argument, Dylan. I want to hear it. I'm curious.
Okay, the short version of this is I don't think you should ever go backwards ever in comics.
Okay,
I think
fair.
the cool thing that the sliding time scale is inherently terrible, and that especially now that we have the ability to go back and read whatever issue of whatever, then they should stop rebooting it and just say, okay, start reading from here like it's manga. People are used to doing that. Read volume 1.
That's true.
And keep going.
That's
so I
true.
think that either he should still be Electric Blue, or from Electric Blue, he should have gone to some other new fucking thing.
I don't agree. Superman's Superman for a reason.
I think that would work for Marvel, but DC relies on the idea of its shared history.
Let me make my argument here. Alex, you just said that your favorite Green Arrow is Connor Hawke, and that's because you grew up with Connor Hawke.
I did not grow up with Connor Hawke.
Okay, but as a teenager, did you have Connor Hawke?
I didn't get to know Connor Hawke until I was in my 20s.
Okay, then never mind.
Yeah.
Wow.
My favorite Green Lantern is Jessica Cruz, a character who did not exist until like 2015. So
Okay.
Alex is the wrong person to try this on.
Yeah.
But my assertion was going to be, although it's been immediately shot down, that your
Yeah.
conception of what the real version of these characters are is always going to be based on what you were introduced to. So I think of Robin as Tim Drake because I grew up with Tim Drake and he's Robin to me.
which is wrong.
But so going forward, people younger than me are going to think that Damian Wayne is Robin. It's whatever you grow up with. So if people had grown up with, an entire generation had grown up with Blue Superman the way I grew up with Kyle Rayner, then that would be real to them. And then you move forward from that, and the next generation grows up with a version of Superman that I wouldn't recognize, but it is real to them. And we don't go backwards over and over.
Once again, I gotta rebut. My favorite Robin is Jason Todd, and he was dead when I was born.
Okay, I think, Alex, you might be an outlier in this, in the fact that you have read every DC comic, whereas most people only read the DC comics that come out between the ages they were 8 and 17.
That's true. I guess normal people have these opinions.
I think Superman's the only character you can't do that for, though, because of pop cultural osmosis.
He's Superman.
Okay. Listen, I love Batman, and I think he should have stayed dead and R.I.P., and Dick Grayson should have been Batman for 20 years.
I do think
I do kind of agree with you.
I think Superman should be in a thruple with Jean Grey and Wolverine.
That's happening currently. You have your desires.
You're thinking of Cyclops.
Blue Superman, specifically.
Yeah. Actually, what Tom Taylor has kind of been setting up is that he wants to give John Kent, who's like the current Superman, the electric blue powers. We'll see where that goes.
Do it.
That's a really good idea. Anyway.
We get a nod to No Man's Land, which is great. The rise of Young Justice and subsequent... Yes.
It's Gita Jackson food. I'm sorry. This little image
Gita
of them right here. I miss the Young Justice so much. Impulse. Anyway.
Jeff Johns and James Robinson's JSA shows up, and Hal Jordan becomes the Spectre. There's Batman Hush.
Starman and Stargirl also are both here.
Yeah. Some more versions of the Titans and the Outsiders that people don't remember. Donna Troy dies. Jason Todd briefly shows up. There's this Hawkman story nobody remembers. There's the last will and testament of Hal Jordan, where Tommy Kalmaku, his old engineer, brings back the planet Oa. Lex Luthor becomes president and actually does a pretty good job until he loses his mind at the very end.
That's incredible. Sorry.
Kara Zor-El comes back. Supergirl comes back. Stephanie Brown dies in War Games series everybody loved and still remembers and respects. No one has any problems with.
Yeah, everyone is totally fine with War Games. Nobody had any issues with the ending of War Games. Nobody spent the next 20 years of their lives mourning Stephanie Brown and wishing for her return every single day.
My main problem with this particular chapter of the backup is that it doesn't rhyme and end in a chorus of "We didn't start the fire."
But they should have to do the version of "We Didn't Start the Fire" that corresponds to each generation of comics. Like this should have been "It's the End of the World as We Know It," the REM song. Because that's the "We Didn't Start the Fire" of the 90s.
Yeah.
No,
there you go.
This is the Gen X version. Absolutely.
And maybe one of them is Bob Dylan's "Subterranean Homesick Blues." That could be a verse.
Yeah, that should be the Silver Age one.
Yeah.
The one that we would be for now after this book would be that Funny Feeling by Bo Burnham, which is the millennial version of that song.
No, it would be the Fall Out Boy one that's all out of order, and it would be incomprehensible because all the events would be mixed up.
Which is true of comics.
Yeah. I can't believe Fall Out Boy is real.
Yeah. And we end with this ominous image of Ralph and Sue Dibney, which is going to take us up to basically the modern age of comics as this was written, where pow, biff, bam, comics aren't just for kids anymore. We also talk about rape and murder. In
a really clumsy, inefficient way where it doesn't make any sense who the killer was. Anyway.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make any sense who the killer was in Identity Crisis. And it's weird because Brad Meltzer writes books, presumably where the mysteries make sense. But this one it didn't.
It's almost like they asked somebody who writes novels to write a comic book and found that it was a different medium.
Whoa. Him and Jodi Picoult
Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to ask if we wanted to throw things up on the Blackboard, but if anyone else has anything they wanted to start to say, please go forth.
Yeah. Was there anything in this particular issue that stood out to you as someone with some familiarity with the concepts of DC Comics? Like, oh, that's something I remember, or that's something I'm curious about.
I have some. Obviously, I'm not as familiar with really any of these characters, but there was a bit of DC lore that really stuck out to me.
Yeah.
That I would like to know more about because it is going to be permanently burned in my brain. As soon as I saw it, it is actually from the backup. I hope that still counts.
Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely. Mine's from the backup.
On the last page of the backup, there's a single box here that just captured my imagination that says, after a large portion of San Diego crumbled into the Pacific, it became known as Sub Diego.
Oh, yeah. That's what was going on in the 2000s Aquaman comics of the time.
Sub Diego.
Another development that definitely stuck around and did not get undone.
Yeah, which introduced a new Aqua girl named Lorena Marquez, who was kind of the most interesting part of the Aquaman family at the time and has kind of disappeared from comics since. But it was kind of this way of trying to thread the needle of keeping Aquaman relevant to the surface world while also being part of the undersea world. Like, what if we sank a modern city and that became the new Atlantis? Let's try to relive the trauma of what it was like for Atlantis to sink in the modern age. If we sank this like revered city with this culture that everybody that's like a part of the global conversation. So yeah, that was the idea, to take a city and put it under the sea so Aquaman could be more relatable.
I like that. What?
Yeah.
Does he save the animals in the zoo?
That's a good question. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
You gotta save the zebras, the giraffes.
They built an ark. Yeah. I floated for 40 days and 40 nights.
I looked this up on the Aquaman fandom wiki, and it's this one sentence stood out to me. It is notable that Sub Diego consists almost entirely of areas immediately affected by the International San Diego Comic-Con, considered the largest media-related convention in the Western world.
What a coincidence.
Oh, crazy. Why don't they just keep that part underwater? That would be great for all of us.
Yeah, this was a test balloon to see how people would feel about the idea, and then they were going to really do it.
There was a solution to the whole Sub Diego thing where San Diego is saved for reasons unknown, and Aquaman disappears, which is why Aquaman is not present in this comic at all. And one of the mysteries after Infinite Crisis is what happened to Aquaman. And we find out Aquaman made this sort of bargain with these like sea-dwelling elder gods to save the city, and he would become like this monster, this like ancient one, and live among them beneath the sea. And that was kind of his status quo for a while until Blackest Night in 2010.
That's what undid it.
Yeah.
Okay, I was wondering about that because it says that in order to raise Sub Diego back into San Diego, Sub and San are also not opposites, but I'm just going to let that lie. He turned into an eldritch monster in order to be able to raise it back on land. And I was like, how did that happen? But the fun part of comics is reading
Your FetLife profile. Do you mark yourself a Sub or a San?
Sorry. I really like how one sentence in a comic book can send you down a rabbit hole of just pure nonsense. I love comic books so much. So we're going to throw Sub Diego on the Blackboard, please. I think that would be great. For me, I just have to talk about, we already talked about Bernie Bro Oliver Queen, but I love Bernie Bro Oliver Queen so much. Oliver Queen becoming the Bernie Bro archetype long before the Bernie Bro was invented. It's just perfect. Like, I don't know how this comic book intersected reality in a specific way. This is 2006, and 10 years later, people will be talking like Oliver Queen every single day of their lives.
Was he like this before Mark Waid?
I think he had a couple of different political turns, right?
Okay.
Bob Haney and Neil Adams were really who reinvented Green Arrow in 1969 as part of his Brave and the Bold run, where he was teaming up with Batman every other month. And it was Denny and Neil who really ran with Green Arrow's political leanings in the 70s series by setting him up as a foil to Hal Jordan. But yeah, he's been that way ever since.
Nice.
They used to use him that way in the satellite era of the Justice League too, but his foil there was Hawkman. At least since then, he's the soapbox for liberal comics writers to get their shit in. And I don't know if has there ever been a point, you would probably know, Alex, where you could tell that a conservative was writing him as a straw man to get kind of rebuffed.
Well, in The Dark Knight Strikes Again, by Frank Miller. He's he's kind of set up as this talking head to oppose the Ayn Randian question, where both of them are portrayed as equally ridiculous.
That's Gans.
Yeah, I think that usually what happens is conservatives push him even farther left, far past any kind of comprehensible argument.
Yeah. Stalin didn't go far enough.
Yeah, he turns into a tankie, basically. Yeah. There should just be a separate superhero that is a tankie. And if you want to hear about my idea for a reboot of the character Anarchy, DC, just email me. I know.
Oh, that's Rocket Red, baby.
I thought it was the Haunted Tank. Is that?
Oh, there you go. The Haunted Tank, who is piloted by the ghost of a Confederate general.
Oh, okay. I guess that's not that.
He can team up with the racist car from Supernatural.
Yeah. Dylan, what do you want to throw up on the Blackboard?
I just want to put up there Lex Luthor, Impractical Joker.
Yeah.
He's just a god-level prankster, this Lex Luthor.
Yeah, absolutely. He was really into flash mobs. Now he's planning his own.
Yeah, it's my favorite episode of Justice League Unlimited, Question Authority, is where the Question is trying to unravel Luthor's whole presidential campaign. And what he finds out is that Luthor put all of this together just to piss Superman off.
Do you know how much power I'd have to give up to become president? It's one of my favorite Lex Luthor lines in anything.
The best. Oh my God.
No, Lex is just committed to the bit. It's like if anyone in any of my husband's various group chats was given super genius intellect and billions of dollars. They're just like, okay, well, I'm going to change the national anthem into the
Cotton Eye Joe.
Problems, clown, and wife, or sitting is the opposite of standing. And I'm going to do it because I'm a billionaire.
Yeah.
Oh, and Dalton, in case you did not know this, if you didn't already love the Question, in Justice League Unlimited, the Question is voiced by Jeffrey Combs.
Jeffrey Combs, the
fantastic.
GOAT.
Oh, nice.
You should absolutely watch any episode of Justice League Unlimited the Question is in, because it's so good.
I want to say this week I finally achieved my lifelong dream of owning every single The Question action figure ever made. So I've got that on display in my apartment now. I'm very happy with it.
It's funny that there's a Question Funko Pop because the whole thing is that he doesn't have a face.
That's what makes it the best Funko Pop. He doesn't have those creepy beady eyes. They can't put it on him.
Yeah.
And that's what's great for the Funko Corporation because they don't have to print anything. They just give you the demo. Yeah.
Yeah. They're like, put a hat on it. Done. Don't have to worry about this anymore.
All right. What I want to put on the Blackboard is this one half a sentence from the backup where he says, until Hal Jordan sacrificed his life to reignite the sun, in some ways atoning for his role in Zero Hour. This is the culmination of not only my favorite event comic, but also my favorite death in superhero comics. And speaking of moving forward and not backwards, I really think Hal Jordan should have stayed dead after this.
100% agree.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I love how they moved him to the Spectre afterwards. That would have been a great role for him going forward.
Yeah, it had a solo title and everything, which the Spectre had not maintained for a pretty long time.
J.M. DeMatteis wrote it. It was great.
Cool.
It was a great example of how DC can transition characters to new roles.
Yeah.
When they want to, right? Where finally all of the different Robins now have their own specific identities as heroes. And they do actually think, well, long term, it's going to be confusing if they're all Robins. So we should just change some of these. But people like Hal Jordan too much. That's what I feel.
Yeah.
And he's the most bland character possible. People name Jeff like it too much. He's the most bland person possible, so I don't know why. But they wanted him back so bad. And now there's multiple Green Lanterns, and it's confusing.
This is where I will again defend my thesis, is that if all comic writers do is try to make things the way that they were when they first fell in love with comics, you never go anywhere. You only ever go in a circle. And even now I see there are people, writers my age who I know who very clearly grew up with Batman the Animated Series or with the new Gotham era of Batman books that I love so much, trying to chase that heat. And it's a mistake. Do something new.
It's true.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
Anyway, I did want to talk a little bit about the Final Night. What I like about the Final Night is that it's not about trying to fight some big galactic menace who's trying to exterminate all life. It's the sun has gone out. What do we do now?
Oh, shit.
So it's this global crisis where everyone has to keep humanity alive and figure out what to do while everybody freezes to death in the dark. And at one point, like, Etrigan shows up and makes them an offer like, hey, if you want to move Earth to hell, we'll keep you warm. And everyone's like, no, fuck no, get out of here, Etrigan. And like you see in all the different tie-in books, everybody's trying to keep Earth or the people they care about alive in their own way, until ultimately Hal Jordan, who just like went psycho and tried to destroy the universe, atones for what he did by giving his life to reignite the sun. And it's like this genuinely affecting moment where he's like, I know this won't make up for everything I did, but at least I can do something good with my last act on the Earth.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
It's like the platonic ideal of a superhero death, which is a grand sacrifice.
And he's like screaming the oath as his body falls apart. It's just good comics.
Yeah, it's so powerful. It's a great ending.
Yeah.
And great endings are what the sliding time skill steals from fans over and over again. I've now said enough about it.
All right.
That was Dylan's corner.
But you won't find that problem in the Dark Universe. No,
the Dark Universe, we've removed the reset button and we put tape over it.
Yeah. Don't touch.
What's our next segment, Gita?
Our next segment is just our favorite thing that happened this issue. And I'll just start, like, my favorite thing is Mad Booster Gold. I love Mad Booster Gold. It makes me long for Booster Gold on the silver screen. When I see him throwing a little tantrum like a baby, think it's perfect. I love thinking about who would play Booster Gold other than Donald Faison, who was the perfect casting.
Yeah,
rest in
played
peace.
for 5 minutes.
Oh my God, so upsetting. But to me, like, one, it's a beautiful drawing of his face. I love how mad he is. It only could have been better if maybe there was like spittle coming out of his mouth, but I love that his like drawn back tongue and that you can see literally all of his teeth. It's like an influencer making an apology video. There's nothing he can do or say to make people like him, but he's trying nonetheless. It really does anticipate YouTuber apology economies like a little bit more than I think anyone else thought would happen. But I love Booster. It's the only place he shows up in this issue, and I love it when characters are wrong and still trying to defend themselves.
Yeah.
It makes me happy.
I was rereading Kingdom Come for the first time in a while this week, and the edition I read comes with all these liner notes from Mark Waid. And one thing Mark says about the scenes with Batman's little collective of heroes is that the only reason Green Arrow is here, there's no narrative reason for him to be in this story. He just really, really loves doing the lefty rant Green Arrow thing. It's his favorite thing to do. And it's just like pure self-indulgence. And this, Mark Waid's chief role in 52 is shepherding the Elongated Man story. So there was no reason Elongated Man had to go to Star City for this. This is just Mark Waid being like, I have a shot to write Green Arrow while Ralph is exploring this lead. Let's have a scene where we check in on Green Arrow. And it's clearly just like what makes this series so fun. It's writers checking in on their favorite characters. Like, let's indulge in Ollie for a little bit, see what he's doing in all this chaos. And it's just such a moment like, this is why I got into this, to write scenes like this. And just the joy comes off the page.
Yeah, it's remembering some guys.
Yeah.
That activity we all love to do.
Yeah, I love to remember guys. I think about guys all the time. I'm thinking about guys right now.
Dylan, what was your favorite moment from this issue?
I agree with Alex. I'm also thinking about guys. No, I'm thinking about that great panel from A Green Arrow where it just seems like it sums him up so perfectly. The idea that he's a superhero, but he's not just about, like order. He has a more intricate idea of justice and and who a superhero ought to serve.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like I said, it's stuck with me as like one of the quintessential moments of the character in my personal experience. So definitely not my favorite.
Yeah, no, I love that. It's absolutely true. I love the way that he maneuvers the scene so that the looter is morally correct. Also, he's stealing milk and diapers. Like, what could he be stealing that for other than a child that's hungry and is going to poop soon? Yeah. All right, Dalton, what was your favorite moment?
We were talking earlier about the sort of rigid panel structure and how then when there is a big splash or just a larger sort of focus panel, it really feels like the bottom falls out and has a lot of impact. And I really felt that in the panel where John is protecting Dr. something.
Kala?
Avesti.
Dr. Avesti, when he's protecting her from the explosion, like that page turn and seeing that pan, I just love the art, like the way he's lit, the like very strong action in his stance.
Yeah.
It's just, and then like the inset panel in the bottom right of the look on his face, which is so expressive and determined, and it really just took my breath away, just that panel. And that was like, that moment really kind of stopped me in my tracks, just because it's gorgeous comic making.
Yeah, no, comic books, they split the difference between books and movies, right? Where with a book, you can control the action in your mind. And with a movie, like the way the visual imagery is presented to you guides how you understand the story. And you can just do both in a comic book. So you can have a page turn moment where you open the page and you're like, oh my God. In the same way that a smash cut can really give you the same sort of feeling of emotion.
With that, I think it's time to move on to answering the questions, which is our segment where we pick up questions submitted to us by listeners of the show who can write into 52mailbag@gmail.com. Now, this is an exciting episode because we record these well in advance, and this is the first time we're getting questions in from people who have actually listened to the show.
Yeah, people know what we're doing now, so now we get questions that are perhaps less pedantic.
I don't have to solicit on Blue Sky like, hey, you got any questions about comics? Send them to this email address for this thing I can't talk about. So our first question comes from Carlos from Brazil, who says, my question for the mailbag is an obvious one, but one that needs to be answered. If you could add someone to the 52 writers room, who would it be? And which lesser known character would you put them in charge of?
Oh my God. That's a hard one. If anyone has an idea off the tip of their tongue, I have to think about it for a second. I mean, other than I think it would be it wouldn't work. It would be bad. But can you imagine if Christopher Priest just put the Ray in here?
Oh my God, I would love
Wouldn't that be good?
Well, I would want Christopher Priest on here doing Steel.
Oh, man.
I would want Priest to do the Steel storyline.
Yeah.
Now, are we limiting ourselves to like writers who had been available at the time, right?
In 2005, 2006?
Okay.
Yeah.
I think let's do that.
Yeah.
I don't have any ideas for characters, obviously, but like the name that came to mind as I was reading this was Gail Simone, and was kind of surprised she wasn't involved in it, given I think you were talking about she did a lot in the lead up to Infinite Crisis, right?
Yeah.
So it would have been interesting to have a little bit more.
A Secret Six storyline would have fit right in.
She could have done something with Catman, would be the obvious one.
Right.
But I think that Secret Six launched, the ongoing for Secret Six launched around this time, right? So she was writing those characters concurrently.
Yeah. I remember picking up Secret Six that she was writing at the time, thinking to myself, what a great time for comics. These books are both so weird and so fun.
Yeah. Kind of her best work.
Generally.
I would go with Ed Brubaker, old Bruby, Greg Rucka's partner in crime. Throw him on the team. I mean, he's a proven Catwoman guy, but I would want to give him someone else.
Did Catwoman have an adopted daughter at this point in time?
Yeah, she did have which was happening in the Catwoman title.
Yeah.
It would defeat the point to give it to a character who had their own book at the time. I would want to focus on more like it would be cool to see his take on like the Flash rogues, I think.
Oh, man.
That would be interesting. Like Trickster and Pied Piper, they get a lot of spotlight in the ill-fated sequel to 52, Countdown. But I think if someone like Brubaker was taking control of that story, it would have been a lot more interesting.
I think I would want to bring in Judd Winnick to do something with some of the outsiders that got thrown away at this time period. Like Shift has a cameo.
Shift! I love Shift!
I think follow something like Shift or maybe Thunder and Lightning. You know, people who had been on that team that got dissolved right before this.
Yes.
Yeah.
But when the Outsiders team suddenly got really bad, which is something that happened to a lot of books around 1 year later, because they had to account for these major shifts that fucked all their stories.
Unless you could shoehorn Kyle Rayner in there
Bring
somewhere.
in the Haunted Tank.
Haunted Tank. Who's writing Haunted Tank?
But this time haunted by a communist.
Okay. Haunted Tankie.
Yes,
oh
Haunted
my God.
Tankie.
That would be really good, though.
Yeah.
Oh, man, that's how you did that comic book, whatever exists. But I wish it was real.
One more question. Hi, this is Zane writing in from North Carolina to say I absolutely loved episode 0 of the new show. It was so refreshing to listen to a discussion about DC Comics filled with all the love and joy I associate with my favorite books and characters. Too many comic podcasts are overly cynical about modern comics, and your show was such a breath of fresh air for me. 52 is also one of the first big comic arcs I ever read, and I'm excited to revisit it along with you. This is exactly the email I love to see. This is what we want, people.
Every day he gets emails positive.
Yeah. I have a question for the show. I noticed Alex said he was reading Mark Waid's World's Finest, a great choice, and it got me thinking, how do you find time to keep up with current comics and read old books at the same time? I've been trying to do a chronological read-through of the major DC events post-crisis. Don't do that. That's a bad idea. But I found it so tough to get through stuff like Death and Return of Superman or Nightfall while also reading 5 to 6 new issues every week. And that doesn't even mention getting into other publishers. How do you guys do it? Do you have a system? Or have you just been reading comics for long enough that you've caught up with all the classics?
You see, for me, I made it my job.
Yeah.
I made it my job to keep up on these things. So now I'm forced to, so I can earn income with which to feed my family.
Yeah.
So maybe that.
What helps is having people you trust give you recommendations. Don't have to go in a line. You can bounce backwards and forwards through time. And part of the joy of comics is discovering, oh, so that's what that was about.
Yeah.
Like that sense of discovery is what these large universes offer.
Do you guys have any tips? I know, Dalton, you are a writer of comics, but I don't get the impression that you're keeping up with a lot of floppies these days.
Unfortunately, I'm not. Yeah, like I fell behind when the pandemic started. I think, and a lot of books started getting delayed and stuff. I fell off of a lot of titles, and then I started reading some back, collections and stuff. But these days, the only thing that I've managed to stay on top of a little bit is the X-Men line. I'm trying to see it through to the end of Fall of X and everything because I've loved a lot of what's been going on there, but even that I've fallen behind on. This podcast also has taken up a lot of time that was once spent digging into comics and stuff, and so I unfortunately, I really want to get back in. There's a lot of things that I know I've missed that I really want to read. I would love to dive more into DC, but it's hard. That's why I was really happy to do this because it gave me, an excuse to sit down and be like, okay, well, it's my job tonight to read 8 issues of a comic book, I love excuses like that. Yeah.
A great, another thing that you can do is make up podcasts. So it's excuses to meet people you admire and hang out with your friends. That's another thing you can definitely do.
Absolutely.
Love that. Yeah, for me, it's just, I'm not up to date on anything. And I have so many comic books on my iPad that I haven't read. But I can't read a novel before I go to sleep because then I'll get too invested in the novel and stay up all night. But if it's too boring when I'm reading, then I will just go and look on my phone and look at Twitter all day. But if I'm reading a comic book, I can usually get a couple issues in me before I'm like, this is kind of dumb, and I fall asleep.
Yeah.
Dylan, do you have any tips or tricks for our listeners?
I mean, for me, it's just to not mind being behind on stuff. I economically can't be buying floppies anymore, and because I have a small apartment and now a baby, I can't really be collecting omnibuses and stuff like that. So I have been doing the Marvel Unlimited, sometimes the DC Infinite type apps. It saves a lot of money, and it makes you feel less guilty about the number of books that you want to read.
Yeah.
You have the full freedom to jump back and forth. If I'm reading every book from the Krakoa era of X-Men, and I'm like, man, this really makes me want to go back and read something that I didn't read, like Messiah Complex. You can just do it. And don't make it just follow your bliss and know that you're always going to be behind, and that's fine because that means you don't have to wait till the next issue comes out.
The DC Universe Infinite app, if I could talk about that for a second. There are tiered memberships. On the highest tier, comics come out literally 1 month of delay after release date. So if you can tolerate being 30 days behind, that's a really economical way to just have the entire DC library.
Yeah. And if you, like Dylan, don't care about being late on stuff, which I think is I think embracing not being up to date on everything is a wonderful lifestyle to have. In
comics culture, it's an essential because I don't care about, I've reached the point where I used to be so plugged in and trying to be part of the comics discourse. When I was doing more comics criticism and stuff, you know what? Now that becomes the entire experience of reading comics is dealing with the backlash and the backlash to backlash and with the personal drama within the industry. And it's not that I don't care when a writer or artist does something unforgivable and we just, change the way we talk about them or engage with their work. But I don't need, especially if we're talking about people who are really mad about the ending of part 1 of a 6-part story as if there aren't 5 more parts left. I don't want any part of it. I just want to read the story and let it happen.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I mean, if we're in the era now where a lot of people complain about writing for trades, just wait then.
Right.
Just fucking wait. If that bothers you so much, then just wait and see how the entire story, how it's going to play out. I do enjoy sometimes being able to catch up to something. Like when I keep getting caught up on Chainsaw Man on the Show to Dump app and then waiting for several weeks because I'm like, I want to read a whole bunch of it at once. I want to see what everything's going to, I want to just be able to binge it every once in a while.
You'll also remember a full story arc better than you will an issue that you read and then a month later an issue that you read between 6 other comics.
It's absolutely true.
That's the thing for me is like, especially if I'm following a lot of comics, by the time the next issue comes out, I'm always like, fuck, what happened in the last one? And then I've doubled my comics I'm reading because I have to reread the last one. Like, I remember trying to follow Wicked and the Divine as it was coming out.
That was hard.
And I just couldn't do it because it was too dense. And I would forget the nuances of the character interactions and stuff. And so then when I started collecting the trades, I was like, oh, it's written in a more kind of novelistic format anyway, but it was so much easier to follow once I went to trades instead of little chunks.
Yeah, I felt similarly about Kieran Gillen's other series that he was doing concurrently, Die, which he describes it as goth Jumanji, which is that's just what it is. And I really like it, but especially like they go into their tabletop universe's world, and it has all these intensely layered references to the history of fantasy and like J.R.R. Tolkien and World War I. And reading that in a trade, you're just like, this is crazy. Anyway, moving on. But you don't understand. It's trying to build to something else. And also just the fandom culture for me. I'm 34. It's boring now.
Yeah.
I'm bored by it. I have other things to argue about, like why when my husband forgets to get toilet paper or something like that. I don't know.
Yes.
He usually remembers though. Dylan, David, I love you.
As I get older, my fandom spaces get smaller because I only want to talk to certain people about the things I like. Because you don't like it the same way I like it unless you're this particular person.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sounds like David's also getting slandered on the toilet paper thing. Is that something we need to be concerned
David's
about?
good at picking up toilet paper. Sorry, no. David's perfect and I love him. No. He's my husband. I love him. God, I'm sorry, David, for saying anything mean about you.
Thanks so much for coming on the show. Really,
seriously.
Thank you for
had a blast
having
with
us.
you guys.
This was a blast.
Is there anything you would like to remind our listeners about before we bid farewell this week?
I mean, please check out Are You Afraid of the Dark Universe? We just started phase 3. We're sort of modeling it after the Marvel Cinematic Universe in structure, at least. So we wrapped up our phase 2 with a big like Avengers style crossover. We've just kicked off phase 3. We had Gita on the show. They pitched a remake of the sci-fi classic Colossus, The Forbin Project.
Ooh.
Dylan just pitched on a recent episode The Mummy Heaven's Gate, our second sequel to the Tom Cruise Mummy film. We're doing a holiday special. In January, we have Joseph Fink from Welcome to Night Vale coming on to pitch a Teen Wolf series.
Oh, man.
We've got Branson Reese pitching Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, but with an updated version of Abbott and Costello.
Hell yeah.
So we're having a lot of fun over there. And we have a Patreon, patreon.com/Dylan and Dalton, which is $5 a month. And you can join our fan community. And we have a bonus podcast and we do movie nights on Discord. And Dylan, am I leaving anything out?
No, I mean, that's the whole kit and that's all, folks. That's the whole kit and caboodle. Can't say it. That is the entire kit and the caboodle too.
Wow. Thank you.
Please keep that all in the podcast.
No, we will. I promise you that.
Absolutely.
For us, I guess now that we have officially lost the podcast, you can get a little bit of a time estimate on how long it took us to launch this based on this statement. But I'd like to remind our listeners to support us over on aftermath.site.
Yes.
If you go to aftermath.site/products, you can subscribe. It's going to be a grand old time. And I personally would love if you did this because I need money to live. So that would be great for me. Thank you.
Aftermath rocks. Proud to be a member.
Thank you so much, Dalton. It is so fun to see you in the Discord and to see everybody, all the Coheed and Cambria fans fall for your band.
Yeah.
Yep. I found my people.
Yeah. It's Nathan Grayson. Nathan Grayson, who just got back from a Coheed and Cambria cruise. But that's a story for another time.
Oh, he went on the cruise. I want to hear about that. Yeah.
Yeah. You should bug him about that.
I have a video game podcast where I talk a lot less than I do on this one called Insert Credit, where I ask the smartest people I know in video games the stupidest questions I can think of. And it's been going since 2012 and very proud of it. And if you want to go check that out, we're always having a good time over there. I don't know how to plug this show because it's been around forever. But if you want to hear more of this nonsense, but about a different toxic fan culture, that's the one to go to.
All right, Dylan and Dalton, thank you so much for being on the show for this super long recording in the evening, which I really appreciate your time. And I loved having you on. If we can make this work again for a later issue after, I'd love to hear more about what Dalton thinks about 52, especially.
I would like to keep up on it. I'm hoping I can keep going past issue 8 over the holidays. I'm invested now.
Nothing's stopping you.
Yeah.
Wait, if we don't have you on the show again, just DM me on Discord because I want to hear everything. So.
Yeah. I got a question for you, Gita.
Yeah, what is it?
What I'd like to know, just between you and me, our guests and the listeners don't have to hear this, but just personally, are you ready?
Am I ready?
Are you ready?
Am I ready?
I'm asking you.
I'm not, but it's fine. 52 Pickup is an Aftermath production created by Gita Jackson and Alex Jaffe and edited by Esper Quim with original music by John Ahrens. The views and opinions expressed on this show are solely those of the show's personalities and do not reflect those of DC Entertainment or Warner Brothers. Please rate and review our show wherever you can and send your questions and comments to 52mailbag@gmail.com. Never stop reading comics.